So when we introduce the program of Upfront Fridays, we talk about interviewing neighbors. And Michael, you have been around from via Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., the world, but you were in the Boardman neighborhood, where I am. And good morning, Sabra.
Good morning, Amy.
So here you are, a neighbor, and you've written a new book.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me. It's a great opportunity, and yeah, it's nice to be able to just walk down the street to come to an interview.
Pretty
Yeah,
sweet,
really,
isn't it?
really.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the new book is Dark Matters, and you came from something of the business world, right?
Right.
And you have an economic forecast, and you're kind of building your novel on that. Tell us about that.
So at the core, and what kind of been in my head for years was a story about dark matter and kind of a couple of people, an unlikely duo who discover what dark matter is if you follow the universe and the stories of kind of figuring out where we're from and how the universe was formed. But behind that, the backdrop is really this story of kind of the future of income inequality and really where the world's headed in terms of the current discussion around one percenters and the income gap. And if you look at the numbers and the way that kind of the wealthy are keeping most of the new wealth that's created in the world, if you run that out for a couple more generations, it could be a pretty scary possibility. So thinking about that, but what I try to do rather than, there are a lot of books out there on nonfiction books, which are phenomenal, but it's kind of like my other topic, dark matter. I try to read, Stephen Hawking or Brian Greene. You get about 10 chapters in, and you just And these income inequality books are the same way. I mean, PhDs writing, incredibly intelligent individuals writing about, the math behind, the numbers and what that looks like. And I said, what if we tried a more entertaining forum? What if we tried a book that provides some of that same debate and conversation, not so much trying to bash the rich, but looking at fairly. I mentioned earlier we try to upset everyone equally. So if you read the whole book and you don't find something that gets you upset, then you probably were reading too fast. So just trying to look at what that world might look like and what are the potential benefits of trillionaires. In about 50 or 60 years, the world should have its first set of trillionaires, which you think billionaires is a lot of money. You should see how much money. Imagine what you can do with $1 trillion. So what could a handful of people like that do? Imagine the technology we're going to have in another 50 years. And when you combine that kind of money with the kind of technology we'll have when computers are going to be faster than the human brain, and you're going to be able to do things that just boggle the mind. That combination creates some pretty interesting possibilities for a book of fiction, of course, but also just things to think about. Yeah, as far as wow, that's and even writing the book, I would stop and say, wow, I never thought of that before.
Oh,
that's
great.
a little,
So this is a scary book.
That's a little worrisome. So, but at the same time, it's step behind. You've got a physicist who's kind of coming at what dark matter. He's stumbled on something from the scientific side of the house, and then there's a woman who's more of a spiritualist and having visions, and she's coming at it from more of the spiritual side. So the two of them kind of connect. They, as you can imagine, don't necessarily see eye to eye early on, and so they're trying to deal with this. And the discovery, of course, is throwing what the trillionaires in charge have kind of locked down things in the status quo, and it throws everything into a big, and so how does that all play out is kind of the story of Dark Matters.
And as this goes forward, there's that economic kind of base, but it's being billed as science fiction, right?
It is, and I call it a not too distant future, and it's set about 60 years from now. But there's a lot of kind of it's kind of a techno thriller as well, as the way I'm kind of think of it as a dystopian techno thriller or utopian, I guess, depending on your perspective on how you might like that part of the world in that sense. But it's a lot of kind of new technology, a lot of what the world might look with. How are androids and robots going to play a role in our future world, and how is technology itself, and what kinds of things, what does the internet look like 50 or 60 years from now, what kinds of things, and how does that, what do you have as the 99%, what the technology as Moore's Law continues and things are cheaper, everybody's got a cell phone, well, what does everybody have 50 years from now, and what are the things that even the least well off of us are going to have. And
what do you think that is?
Oh, there's also, so how do you have, what do cell phones become, how small are they, how ubiquitous are they, and in fact, what might you be given for free in exchange for the data it provides to those in charge, as an example. So you could, if you're willing to have a robot made in your house for free, would you allow it to send video and information from your household back to the corporations in exchange for doing that.
Okay, so this is reminding me a little bit of The Circle. Did you read that with Dave Eggers? And it's sort of, it's like it's based on sort of a Google. It gets out of control.
Right.
Same kind of thing. And I read that and I went, oh no.
Right.
Am I going to read this and go, oh no?
I think in some places you will probably say, but at some people
Like
will
there's
say,
nothing you can
yeah,
do
there's-
about it. That was how I felt.
That is, I think, the big question. What you know,
Oh.
and so what do we do today? Is that what we want for ourselves in 2 or 3 generations, or are there things we should be thinking about in terms of okay, how income is distributed and what who's in charge of technology? They the trillionaires get their hands on research institutions. They now have their fingers into so they're when new technologies are discovered. Who owns those? Who uses those? Are some things perhaps not in the best interests of humanity, and who gets to decide that? Should we?
Yeah.
I would say Americans aren't real good about looking forward to in 3 generations either.
No, and it's
No,
yeah,
it's sort of live in the moment.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
a little bit of a an instant gratification kind of
A little,
society.
yeah.
It's just a
Right.
tiny bit. So as I drink my morning latte, right? So
Yeah.
so they and that's part of the so I try to. So it's set in 2075, but I try to also talk about how did we get where we
Yeah.
are. So there's as one of the characters and introduced into the consortium, this group of the uber elite, they're giving him the history. So here's how we went from the early 21st century to here, and talking through how did laws get changed? How did the wealthy kind of creatively find a way to keep the money for themselves, and what? So it gives you a little bit of a roadmap, and to me, perhaps a way to think about what do we want to not have happen next week or next month or
Right.
next year that's leading in that direction. So those are the kind of things I think it maybe opens up to debate.
Like maybe there is a fork in the road and you want to take the right one.
And you want to take, which one do you want
Which
to take?
one would it be?
I'm trying. There's probably some examples where maybe I make it a little more obvious which is the right one, but I'm trying to
that's
say,
good. We
look,
need
it's,
that.
yeah, it's for you to decide. Do you want? There's a one of my favorite examples is as far as tax law. There's a debate in here about something that happens in 20 or 30 years from now called the max tax, and the trillionaires figured out that we could raise the taxes on the wealthy, and we'll just put a cap on it.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a limit to how much people should have to pay? If you pay $500
Right.
million in taxes, is that enough? Is there some point where it's enough? Well, and they labeled it the max tax, and they ran a big campaign, and they got lots of money, and they got it passed. Well, guess what that does? That allows them to do to the 1% what the 1% is doing to the 99%, because they get, so you run the numbers, generates $50 or $60 billion a year in new taxes, but the trillionaires get to keep an extra 10 billion. You run that out for 30 years, and that gap suddenly becomes huge. So those kind, you say, well, it's, and they use the money for education, they use the money for welfare. They, we do all these great things, and oh, by the way, the few of us over here are just going to go through the roof with, and that's how we became trillionaires. So that,
of course.
but would you allow that to happen if that put 50 or 60 billion dollars a year into the coffers for good causes? It's an interesting
Instead of that
question.
percentage. So Dark Matters has a pun in that title. I mean, we're
does.
talking about some
Definitely.
dark matters,
Right.
aren't we?
Right.
Yeah. And I'm
It
sure that
does.
was intentional. So the writing process was fun?
The writing process was fantastic. I spent, decades in the business world writing nonfiction, writing business proposals and doing speeches and those kinds of things. And although this is my first work of fiction, though my competitors would probably say I've been writing fiction for years. But it was a really, it's kind of a, going from being a business consultant where you're supposed to be the expert in the room and have all the answers to being, the least knowledgeable guy in the room everywhere. I'm like a brand new writer. I don't know what I'm doing. So it was, and just I knew how the story ended. I generally had some characters, but sitting down in front of a brand new chapter in the morning and just seeing where it takes you, and having suddenly this cool left turn happen that blows up the rest of your story.
Yeah.
Down to what it was really fun. I had, in fact, it was so much fun. The one book became a trilogy, and now suddenly
Okay,
great.
I got to page 300 and said, well, this is nowhere near ending. So I guess this book it's either going to be a 700 book page book, or it's going to have to be so I'm almost done the second book, and that'll be out, I hope, before the end of the year, and then the third next year. So it's I'm very excited about it.
And you'll be at Horizon Books, and this is volume 1, first printing. You can get it signed at Horizon, and we look forward to having you here.
Yeah, tomorrow from 2 to 4 p.m.
Yes,
That'll be great.
Saturday, the February 6th.
February 6th. Yeah.
So come in, meet Michael. he won't be at a loss for words, and you can have his book signed. Thank
Happy
you.
to talk more about it. Thanks so much for having me
Yes.
in. I mean, I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Yep.
Appreciate it.